Welcome everyone. Really excited about this one. Here with us today are Tyler, Furman, and Ryan, who will do the webinar with us. They're all with Growatt. The name today for the webinar is Smart Energy Storage Solutions and Product Training from Growatt. We've had exceptional uptake of Growatt products in the Canadian market, and super excited to do some more training on some of these products. So with that being said, guys, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, of course. Thanks for the introduction. And yeah, my name is Tyler. I'm the North American Marketing Manager for Growatt, and I'm here with my team, Fermin, who's in the Field Applications Engineer. He is in Boston, and also Ryan Gravel. He is in South Carolina, and he is Service Team Manager. Yeah, we just want to say a big thank you to yourself, Danny, and all of you guys over at Frankensolar, who are Growatt's exclusive partners in the Canadian market for the MIN and EV chargers for our residential inverter and backup systems. We're very happy to have you guys, and we might as well jump right into the webinar here. So we at Growatt, we have 4 different business sections that we are very proud of and releasing to a global market. PV inverters, of course, energy storage, EV chargers, smart energy management, and you can go to the next slide. We've had sustainable growth over the last decade plus that we've been in business. Our revenue's been growing. Our compound annual growth rate for inverter sales and revenue has been growing. Almost 2 million cloud users worldwide, 3.1 million annual inverter production capacity at our facility in Shenzhen, China. We have more than 5,000 employees globally, and we invest 5%, nearly 5% back into R&D with 1,000 R&D engineers developing products every year. Next slide. So this is actually a 3D render of our advanced manufacturing center with that 3.1 million inverter capacity and 400,000 battery pack capacity as well. And we've recently opened up a new factory in Vietnam, which is not currently at capacity, but we do expect it to get there soon. On the next slide, we can view our global footprint. I'm in Los Angeles, and we do have a warehouse and shipping location here. But as you can see, we started off in the Australian market. We're very big in the German and EU market, of course, the Chinese market, and South America as well. So we're very happy to be a global company. And on the next slide, you can actually see where a lot of our service team members and staff are. So again, Fermin would be in the blue there, over in Boston. Ryan in the green as one of our service team persons. And then myself, I'm in the Los Angeles area, currently at the warehouse in our testing lab and facility, shipping facility. So if you do hear any type of forklifts or anything like this, you know, production doesn't stop. We got to get the products out. So of course, we are at Growatt, the #1 global residential inverter supplier, and we're in the top 4 of PV inverter suppliers globally. Again, some of our history in business for more than a decade, expanded quickly into the Australian markets and the EU markets. And more recently, we've launched our residential energy storage solutions in 2015. And 2017, we were ranked global top 10 inverter suppliers, and that has only gone up since then. And of course, reaching #1 in 2020. So that's been great. So our mission, of course, at Growatt is to build the largest intelligent, sustainable energy system for humankind. And in doing that, it entails making great partnerships with companies like Frankensolar. So we've had an ongoing partnership for a couple of years now. They're based in Toronto, and I believe you guys have a shipping warehouse in Alberta as well, which is great. You have, you know, countrywide coverage.
Yeah, we have, for those of you that don't know, so we have a full warehouse and an office in Toronto and the same in Calgary, Alberta.
Yeah, that's excellent. And of course, you guys are selling our flagship MIN XHUS inverter, the V3 whole home backup version, with the APS transmitter, Wi-Fi, LAN, and of course 10-year warranty. And we're going to get into some of the products in a second here. And then as well as EV charger and our APX high voltage battery as well. Next steps, we're developing the generator integration and getting regulatory approval. We know that's a huge thing in the Canadian market. And of course, we love to be generator and automatic backup compatible, as our inverters are. So we're working to get that done very soon. And then, of course, continued regional expansion in the Canadian market, exclusively with Frankensolar, and then possibly carrying additional products. Fermin here is going to go into the SPH, which is a new product announcement for us. So some product introductions. This is our residential hybrid MIN battery-ready inverter. It has a capacity of 3.5 to 11.4 kilowatts. And of course, some of our most popular models, which Frankensolar is selling, is the 7.6, and for larger systems, the 11.4. And that would be 3 MPPTs and 4 MPPTs for the larger model. It's a compact design. It doesn't weigh too much. It's very easy to install. The install is like a 15-minute install time and also a 15-minute commissioning time. And one thing I wanted to point out was the very low RMA rate. There are not very many failures of this particular product, and I think that's why we have outstanding partnerships with our MIN inverter. Of course, it has a NEMA 4X IP65 rating, so it's dustproof, waterproof, and rated for being outdoors. 10-year warranty, dark start operation, DC-AC ratio up to 2.0 for whole and partial home backup as well. So on the next slide, you can see that 2.0 DC-AC ratio. If you have 20 kilowatts of panels, you can dump some of that into the battery while also feeding back to the grid and powering any loads you need. That's great. So you can have an oversized solar system and don't have to have any excess wasted loads or energy up front. Next up is our SYN. Of course, compatible with whole home backup, which Franklin is absolutely doing a bang-up job with all of your guys' installers. Has an on-grid, off-grid switching time of 0.5 seconds. Very easy operation. It's a 200 amp backup switch and transfer switch with a built-in transformer for 120 and 240. Service entrance rated, and of course, as mentioned, the diesel generator input, which can be very useful with that remote wake up and control. And then next, we have our APX high voltage battery system. And this is, of course, you can start with a very low amount of battery storage and expand it up to 30 kilowatts. So it's 5 to 30 kilowatt hours. Again, outdoor rated IP66 design, can be operated in -10 to 50 degrees Celsius. And of course, lithium iron phosphate compatibility. And the next slide here is just the 5 to 30 kilowatt applications. And that on top is the battery control module, which can be used for up to 20 kilowatts. And then next slide, we have the battery mixing. So one of the things, especially compared to the industry in the last 5 years or last 10 years, we can actually do this battery mixing. So it doesn't matter if you have an old pack that you're mixing into a new stack or a new battery that maybe you had a failure rate. Not with us. We typically have very low failure rates, which is amazing to see. But if you did have a new pack or wanted to do expanding on old batteries, you can just mix them, and we have smart charging management. So it's no issue mixing them, no waiting 30, 40 minutes just to charge, to add the battery to the system. That's something the installers love to see. And I'm sure they're loving these quick install times in this new market regime. Next slide, we can have, this is just a standard residential whole home backup system. Typically what our installers in the Canadian market and the US market, of course, are looking at the optional battery. It is, of course, a hybrid inverter, and you can do PV only if desired. Next slide is our pre-PTO mode. Installers can install the battery and then remotely come back and turn it on while the battery's been charging the whole time. If you're waiting on approvals from your local HJ or anything like this, you can essentially install the system and not have to go back just to turn it on once you get regulatory approval, which is amazing to see. And of course, this is our ESS application, and it depends on your market, but of course you can maximize self-consumption. You can do export limits if you want to export to the grid, or if you don't, we can block that, of course, and then time of use arbitrage, which we see a lot of here in California, and I'm sure it's just the same in Canada. So then next up, this is a brand new product for us, shipping now into the US market, and I believe just following behind in the Canadian market as well. So we're looking at a partnership here for this possibly in the future. SPH, 10,000 TL HU US. So it's got 10,000 watts of output power, supports 120, 240, and 208 in parallel split phase output, 10 millisecond switch time, again, waterproof, dustproof, NEMA 4X outdoor rating, 10-year warranty, and does support a slightly wider variety of generators and things like this for light industrial and commercial use when you might be using that 208. So the next slide is just a standard diagram for the SPH, relatively similar. Larger number of generators can be operated there. And the next slide, the compatible low voltage ALP battery. So this is our low voltage ALP battery. We have a couple pending battery partnerships for this product as well. 5 kilowatts per module, very similar. And of course, when you're getting into CNI products, you're going to need a lot of backup. So up to 160 kilowatts with a single inverter, which is just amazing to see. And then on the next slide, it's got a 1.5 DC-AC ratio, which also comes in handy for those CNI installations. And then lastly, our EV chargers, which Frankensolar is of course installing. We have both versions, the AC EV charger, the 7, 9, and 12, which Frankensolar is carrying, and then our brand new and upcoming 40 kilowatt DC EV charger for very large residences. If you have, I don't know, several EV chargers, you need to charge up very fast, or CNI or apartment complexes, things like this. And with the AC, you're charging up in level 2, basically 4 to 7 hours. The DC, level 3 fast charger, 1.25 hours roughly. And this is just AC is using the onboard charger, DC is using a rapid charging station to help convert that power. And lastly, this is our 2024 product lineup. And you can see all of our residential inverters with the MIN there, the transfer switch, SY and transfer switch, and AC EV charger, high voltage system. Our off-grid products, which are also very popular, particularly in other countries. The SPH just introduced over on the right with the DC CNI EV charger. Right in the center is our brand new and upcoming CNI commercial products as well. And on the bottom, of course, our direct-to-consumer portable power stations, and those do go direct-to-consumer. They can be found on Amazon and found on our website. Yes, so we're very happy with the product lineup and super excited that Frankensolar has been carrying our residential products. We love to see it. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Fermin, who can present the newly released SPH 10,000. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, Tyler. So I'll go over the SPH very quick. So this is basically our low voltage battery hybrid inverter option. With this option, you have more options to make it compatible with other battery manufacturers or lead acid battery type. This basically has very great features, this product, as it has an internal ATS, which allows you to make very easy partial home backup configurations. It has a switch time, UPS rated switch time below 10 milliseconds as well. So it's a product already available in the market, and we have it already certified to UL 1741 SB and CSA 22.2 standards. It's basically, yeah, can you please go back to the previous slide? It has 3 MPPT trackers, you can connect up to 2 PV strings per MPPT, and the rating on the current allows you to parallel multiple strings, as it has 22 amps rated power, rated amperage. As Tyler mentioned, it has 10,000 watts of nominal power, and it has an option to connect the generator directly to the wiring box in the inverter. Yeah, next slide. So as I was saying, it has good features. We are currently working on an option to have it to work with AC coupling PV systems coming up in September 20 of this year. It has the generator integration function. It also has a PCS for busbar protection coming up in September as well. It supports all three types of communication, that LAN, Ethernet, Wi-Fi, or 4G optional. As I mentioned, it's certified to UL standards and CSA. It's an IP65 and NEMA 4 rated equipment, so you can use it outdoors. It can connect to a split phase, 120 or 208 volts output. You can stack up to 6 of these inverters in parallel. It has flexible operating modes. It has an integrated APS RSC transmitter. So it comes with all these great functions and great features that at a great value. So it also comes with an integrated RGM. That's optional. You could use the generator port to control an AC smart. And as I was saying, you can make it. It has compatibility with major battery manufacturers ongoing. Although we have already finished development process with Pipes battery, and it's an ongoing process to make it a compatible product with lithium Grid batteries, Simplify, Fortress, and there's some other battery manufacturers we're working with. Yep, next slide. So this is the typical configuration for this SPH inverter, which is a partial home backup setup. Basically, as I mentioned before, it has an integrated ATS, which allows you to have 63 amps of pass-through through the load port. And yeah, you can connect the generator directly to the inverter, which will allow you to charge the batteries during an outage in case the batteries are fully depleted. You have the option to connect either a smart meter for power measurements, or you could use the CTs that are included in the package as well. So this is our AC charger option. It's a level 2 AC charger. Comes in 3 different models: 7, 9, and 12 kilowatt rated output. You can activate it using an RFID card through the app, or just a plug and play charge. It comes with a SAE 1772 type 1 plug port, which is the standard for AC charging. It has an LCD display. It works in multiple work modes, like fast charging, pivot linkage, off-peak, load balancing, which I'll go over in a second. And also, one of the great features that it offers is that it's able to integrate with Growatt ecosystem through the ShineTool app, basically where the users can monitor their PV system along with their EV charger as well and control it remotely. Next slide. Here we have the option, the upcoming level 3 DC charger. That's going to be rated for 40 kilowatts power. It comes with either a single CCS type 1 output or a dual output to charge 2 cars at the same time. It's IP65 rated, NEMA 4X, and it'll be basically the option for CNI, CNI options for EV charging. Next slide. So I'll go over a few of the operating modes that we have in our EV chargers. This first mode is the pivot linkage mode, which allows you to use the surplus PV power to charge your car. Basically, it allows you have to install a power meter in order to use this mode. and it allows you to use the surplus power to charge your car from any surplus PV power. Next slide, please. This mode, this is an option in the PV linkage mode. This is to use it once you arrive home, let's say with a almost depleted battery. You can use this mode to set a time for it to charge at full rate and make sure it uses, after this set time, it uses only surplus PV power. And next slide, please. The smart boost mode basically allows you to set kilowatt hours and also a time to make sure your car has this amount of energy, this level of energy once it finishes. So if it's needed, it'll use the grid power to make sure it charges to the set energy level and at the set time. And last but not least, we have in the last slide, we have the load balancing mode, which allows you to control the amount of power that you that will be on your main panel. So to make sure that you never overload the main panel while charging your EV. But this basically is a great feature. So to make sure you never overload the main panel. And that's about it. With that, I'll pass it over to Ryan to go over the MinXH US installation and commissioning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Fermin. Appreciate it. So as noted, we would next be going over the MIN, which is the sort of flagship residential product that we have in the North American market currently. A lot of people are really excited about it, as previously noted, a fast install time, very quick commissioning. I will clarify one of Tyler's points. I would not say it's a 15-minute install time. It is a 15-minute commission, but obviously conduit wiring and all the different sort of installation factors can have a play. I would say a fair estimate is probably about an hour. Would be, taking a decent pace, not rushing. You can definitely get it up on the wall and running pretty quickly. That said, oh yes.
Yeah, I just said thanks for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, no worries. So that being said, the applications, as mentioned previously, you can do grid tie PV only. Some folks also are now looking in areas with high time of use rates, an AC a couple function without PV. And it also, that functionality also allows people to retrofit a Growatt inverter and ESS system to an existing PV as well. Again, there are some limitations around the charging and discharging functionality, but again, gives a lot of flexibility for people who are looking to retrofit an existing system. From there, you can also do either whole home backup or partial home backup, depending on application, utilizing the MIN, the APX battery, and the SYN transfer switch. As noted, the MIN does have a wide range of capacity in all of the most common used values, the most popular being typically 6, 7.6, 10, and 11.4. They are, again, automatically by default hybrid inverter, unlike some manufacturers that make you pay a premium to get that functionality. It comes with us out of the box. Again, nice lightweight, so it's easy to mount on the wall and get installed. And again, you have the option. One thing I do note in the slides, depending on your site application, we do have 2 communication packages with these. The most popular is a Wi-Fi and 4G communication package, followed by Wi-Fi and LAN for sites that don't have good signal or no available Wi-Fi if you do need to hardwire. That said, we can certainly work with you if you need any support in troubleshooting that. And again, Frankensolar, I'm sure, can work through your project with you to make sure you have the right product. The APX battery, as noted, high voltage.
Sorry, can I quickly jump in here? I just want to quickly highlight that there's, if you can go back to the previous slide.
Yeah, certainly.
The, So for the Canadian market, we have available what's in the country. What we import is the 3.8, the 5, the 6, the 7.6, the 9, 10, and 11. So we don't have the 3 and the 8.2 available in the country. So don't plan around those if you can avoid
Yeah.
it.
Certainly. Thank you. So again, with the battery, simple stack design, scalable. Again, you might have a customer that wants a little bit of emergency backup initially, and then as times change, maybe their partnership with their utility changes and they need more capacity to offset time of use or peak demand charges and so on. Again, the nice thing is this gives a lot of flexibility around that scaling and functionality. Also lithium iron phosphate design so that it has the thermal runaway resistance of similar products. And again, just gives homeowners peace of mind that they're not sitting with lithium polymer battery sitting on the side of their home. That said, again, scalability just shows the stacking. If you have more than a 20 kilowatt battery, we do recommend 2 stacks just for safety and mounting. The system is also managed with the SYN automatic transfer switch. As previously noted, the generator functionality was expected for this Q4. I actually got a notification yesterday that the firmware has actually passed all our validation testing. So we actually expect to see that coming live quite soon. And we'll keep Frankensolar up to date on that so they can communicate it with you guys. That said, again, you can pair the APX power module with up to 5 to 6 battery modules for a peak output of 12 kilowatts, assuming a 240 volt, 60 hertz grid. That said, again, just gives a good backup for when customers are using some high demand products when the grid is out. With that, you would then have our mobile apps and things like that, such as ShineTools, which is an installer local hotspot commissioning. It's really an installer focused app. You would need an installer login to get that, but Frankensolar has been very gracious. Although you can certainly register an account via us, Frankensolar said for any of their customers, they're happy to get you guys set up with an account so you can get logged in and work on some projects. There is also Shine Phone, which is more of a customer-focused app. It was used with some of our legacy products, but for the customer, it's a great way for them to check the performance of their system on the fly, see how their energy is being distributed between their battery, their loads, and their grid. Again, just nice, simple interface. And then obviously we also have the online monitoring server, which allows both installers to manage their fleet as well as customers to make real-time assessments of how the system is performing and just see what's going on. With that, we'll jump over into the technical side of the MIN, which again, you really have 2 application use cases if you're doing a solar and storage backup, one of which is a whole home backup, as you do have service rated entrance through the SYN. This again allows you to set up the batteries and back up the whole home. Obviously, for really high start lock rotor amp items, you may need to look at a soft start depending on your sizing. But again, I'm sure Frankensolar can coordinate with you guys to make sure you're sizing properly. The alternate is, again, a partial home backup, partial grid. So again, pretty similar to probably what you've worked on with some other ESS solutions. But again, the nice thing is where we manufacture all the components, you have a higher compatibility and an easier installation. With the inverter itself, just a real quick overview of the layout, indicator LEDs on the front showing your status and warnings, which do have related tables, simple bracket system on the back of the inverter. All of your conduit knockouts and DC isolation switch and antennas are on the bottom of the inverter. When you do start preparing your project on site, you just want to make sure you have the appropriate tools to be able to mount the equipment, verify that you have both your mounting bracket and your accessory pouch in the box. From there, you'd want to identify your mounting position. One thing we do call out is you do need 300 millimeters or approximately 1 foot on the left, right, top, bottom, and front of the inverter. Obviously, avoid any major sources of heat. So again, sometimes things like AC, condensers, and things like that can dispel that. Again, just keep that in mind as you're spacing. That said, you do not have to stack the left and right distance between inverters. 1 foot is sufficient between 2 side-by-side inverters. But that said, again, if you have additional heating or cooling concerns, definitely take that into account. You may err on the side of caution to give a little more space. But again, depending on the size of the inverter, it's about 25 to 35 pounds of weight to be supported. So just ensure you're using appropriate anchors or otherwise to ensure secure mounting. That said, this is an actual photo of the bottom of the inverter, again, just highlighting some of the key ports and terminals. When you're mounting the system, you will notice again the DC, COM, and AC outlets. They are pre-templated to 3/4 of an inch. For the AC and DC knockouts, though, you can actually oversize them up to 1 inch, and that's not going to cause any issues with warranties or anything like that. It's just the sizing they happen to stamp it. One tip we do have for installers, just again, to make sure that you guys are protecting your investment and your time, we do typically suggest putting a drain connector at the lowest point of the conduit coming in for the PV lines, just to make sure you don't have any issues of water ingress. Also make sure you use sealing rings as well. I can't say how many times I've seen people just put things in funny ways. Within the lower terminal box, and I actually have photos of all of these, so they'll be much easier to make out. But effectively, you have it separated where your AC connections are on the right-hand side, DC connections are in the center bottom. Above that are your communication and networking, and then to the left is your DC disconnect switch and your rapid shutdown trigger. So within the AC terminals, again, you want to strip approximately 18 millimeters or about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. Cautious not to overstrip because, again, you don't want to be pushing against the circuit board in the back of the terminal block. But with a Min V3 and SYN, you would just be utilizing the 3 grid terminals. One thing we do always call out is do note the neutral is between the 2 lines. You do want to make sure to take that into account. Also, as far as the wiring, again, you can see the ground bar just below. Let's see here. Getting into the PV and battery connection terminal, so having your DC terminals. We do typically suggest using the lower terminals if you're only using if you're not running parallel strings. Use the lower terminals for some strange, I wouldn't say strange reason, but we've had some AHJs that have actually asked for revisions from installers to use the lower port. So that's what we always recommend, again, unless you're using the parallel function. That said, all the positive lines are on the left, negative are in the middle, battery are to the right. Maximum voltage is 600 volts DC. However, that is an open current voltage. Under load, your target will be about 500 volts DC. You can exceed 500 up to 550. However, you may see a slight derate, especially if it's a hut or if there's sun shining on the inverter. If it exceeds 550 to up to 600, you can see the inverter go into standby. So just keep that in mind as you're designing and sizing. But again, with the larger models having 4 different MPPT inputs, allows you to have all your azimuths covered and pair your panels to make sure you're getting the most out of the inverter. That said, with the wiring again, here, if you are going to be using an emergency stop switch, so although it does have a DC disconnect switch, which will disconnect the strings from the inverter, some AHJs do like to have an emergency stop switch installed by the AC blade switch. If so, just above to the left of the PV inputs, you'll see this little jumper on the left-hand side. Basically, you will take that out, remove the jumper, connect. Usually, most people use Cat5 cable, shielded, twisted Cat5. And then what you would do is run that down to the e-stop switch itself. Make sure that you're matching the e-stop switch inputs and outputs to those legs. And again, it can vary by jurisdiction, so this is an optional accessory, but again, for compliance, if you do need it, very simple install. And again, for most people, you just want it within line of sight of the AC switch on the side of the home. That said, we have had the question in the past of, well, what if I have multiple systems? Do I have to run multiple switches? The answer is no. You can actually run up to 3 inverters off a single switch. This diagram here just shows how that would be laid out. Effectively, you're just splicing the signal cable and then bringing them back to the rapid shutdown switch. And then, again, just making sure that you have continuity through. It's a low voltage wire, so there's really not much to it. And then finally, just grounding and antenna connections. There's a screw on the side of the inverter to allow you to ground right to the cooling fins. The antennas are on the bottom of the inverter. They are male and female, so they really can only go one way. But that said, the 4G antenna, if equipped, does have a little gray sticker ring around it just to make it easier to identify. But again, this will all be in your user manual as well. Jumping to the next item. So if the customer is doing a PV only application and they are doing no export or export limitation, things like that, you may have a situation where you might need to install a smart meter in CT. Pretty simple Acro meter photographed on the left. You would just mount it to a 35 millimeter DIN rail and install the CTs with the arrow facing. As you can see in this diagram here, the biggest thing I always recommend to people is just make sure that you're phasing between the reference L1 power, as you can see on the far right image that's circled. You should get a 0 volt reading from that terminal to wherever you're landing the L1 phase CT. If you're getting a 240 volt, it means that you're out of phase. I've seen this happen with a few main breaker manufacturers where the main breaker can actually flip the phases coming in from the utility onto the panel board. So again, just keep that in mind if you are getting weird readings or seeing import when you expect export or otherwise. Within the wiring of the smart meter itself, as far as communication, here you can see the terminal block inside the inverter on the left-hand side versus the smart meter on the right-hand side. Effectively, again, they're just A, G, and B. The one thing we do call out is they're not in the same order inside the inverter as they are on the meter. I know it's a pet peeve of mine, but it is simple. They are well labeled, but we do like to point that out to make sure people are aware. Again, just to make sure you have a positive experience while you're wiring it up. That said, if you do have an SYN transfer switch, this actually has a smart meter automatically integrated. So it actually saves you a lot of time and effort and trouble to get that wired in. So this is just a quick photo showing the standard SYN. Transformer built in, 200 amp utility rated service entrance breaker, PV breaker pre-installed. With the next generation version, will actually allow for up to 3 inverters to be installed on one SYN, which again is a great feature long term. But again, smart meter in there and IP65 rated, so it can be mounted right out with the inverter and the batteries and all of that. As far as working modes, typically you have on-grid, which is where it will spend the majority of its life. Off-grid, if you have a situation where you either need to manually isolate it or if the grid goes down and it needs to provide backup power, you have that available. And then finally, generator working mode, as noted, we're literally on the cusp of having that running as well, which allows the system to smart manage and auto start a generator to supplement the PV, or even in the case of PV not present, you could use that to support off-grid long-term functionality. And I do notice there are some questions coming in the chat and such. I know some of them we may respond to within the chat. Others, we do have a Q&A after we kind of get through the slides, and we'll make sure to answer all your questions at that time, just so people don't think I'm ignoring you. As far as the SYN itself, this is just a high-level overview of the components inside. Basically just your inverter wiring, your main wiring, your generator wiring, your loads wiring, and then communication terminals through. So within the system itself, very first and foremost, basically you want to open the cover, take off the protective plate so you can access the terminals, install conduit as required to the relevant conduit entry points, which I had shown in the prior slide. That said, The only version that we do carry currently that would be in your market is a version with a main breaker. So pretty much before you do any work on the system or do any wiring, you want to make sure that's in the off position. You do have a table on the upper right-hand side of the sizing of what the different conductors would be expected to be. You can certainly grab a screenshot of that, or I'm sure we'll be sharing this activity with Frankensolar, and I'm sure they can share it with you as well for reference. So as far as priority, the way we typically do it is connect your grid lines first. As you can see, again, the main breaker in the upper right-hand corner are going to get your line 1, line 2. There are 2 terminal blocks for neutral and ground. Again, just install those accordingly. We look at 35 Newton meters per screw on each of those. And then again, you can see this cable size note as well. Load, pretty similar. You'll see the load ports just to the bottom left of where that main service entrance is located. Similarly, line 1, line 2 to the lugs, neutral and ground to the bus bars. Again, 35 Newton meters for those main lugs. Then we would be looking at communication between the inverter and the SYN. So there's 2 cables that will come out of the bottom of the main boards on the inverter. One is going to be a power, one is going to be a communication. You can see those pinouts on the left-hand side in their corresponding landing position in the SYN on the inner left of that circuit board. And again, there is a cover that goes around it. But again, if you need to, while installing and it's not powered, the panel can be off temporarily. And then once you have that landed, you can then land your PV into the inverter, or sorry, the PV into the SYN, which again, it will come with 1 breaker pre-installed. I believe it's a 63 amp if I recall. But it allows for pretty much any of our inverters to be tied in. And again, you would just run that through accordingly, make sure to land your neutral and ground respectively. Have that. From there, as mentioned, we do have the generator function as well, which similar to the prior slides, again, you would just have your line 1 neutral and ground landed on the respective lugs or bus bars. And again, communication for this from your generator, it by default comes with a 2-wire start. If your generator has a 3-wire start function, you would just need to look at your generator user guide to see how they adapt a 2-wire start function to their 3-wire. Most of them have little application notes as to how you can convert that. But that communication is actually more in the middle bottom of the circuit board of the SYN versus the left-hand side, which again was the inverter communication. That being said, I also do call out, there are certain situations where you may, just for the sake of caution, want to prepare your customer, even like a generator, if you need to bypass. The SYN does have a bypass function. There's a jumper that comes with the SYN, as well as a manual switch that's accessible from the front plate. If it was needed, that can be bypassed. And in the event something were to happen and you needed to get out to site and service, the customer could do this to make sure they ensure power with grid in the meantime. Again, not that we expect this, but again, I like to give you guys more information than less and just ensure you're prepared to give your customer the best experience. And then finally, on the right, you can actually see there is a neutral ground bond. It is removable in the field. Again, this is really going to depend on your jurisdiction and your inspector. If your code does require it, just keep in mind that that is available inside the SYN. So as far as the battery itself, once you have the inverter and the transfer switch ready, you can start looking at your battery installation. So although the battery is designed to be outside from -10 to +50, and it does have an IP65, you will, generally speaking, like any lithium battery, you don't necessarily want to have it in direct, constant, all-day south-facing sunlight. It's not to say that it's automatically going to cause a failure, but it's just going to have a higher risk of thermal derate and things like that. And then as far as the moisture, again, IP65, however, it's more for the conduit going into the base plates or up the sides or the wiring, things like that. The battery cells themselves are incredibly durable, but for the sake of sort of the accessory equipment and the wiring, we do recommend trying to have at least minor coverage. It's okay if a little water splashes, but we wouldn't want you seeing it submerged or getting sprayed on constantly, if that makes sense. As far as sizing, as far as positioning, you do have two potential layouts. We do offer our default bracket, which is typically a ground bracket. We also have a wall bracket available, ground versus wall. So here it shows wall, but this is actually showing it mounted on the ground, but against a wall. Again, if you have more than 4 battery modules, you will typically do 2 side-by-side stacks as an expansion. We do have an expansion kit with communication, power, and extra base. That being said, you can mount it on a physical wall itself. In doing the wall, it is extremely important that you do have the bases and wall mounts anchored. As you can see on the note at the bottom here, with the battery module stacked, you need to account for almost 620 pounds or 280 kilograms of weight. So it is really important that you have this on a really sturdy surface. So again, it's super common. We see people put small slabs or install it on a piece of concrete. The alternative, again, is on a wall. But if you do that, you want to make sure you can catch a stud or a concrete anchor to hold it properly. As far as wiring, honestly, that's one of the greatest things about this battery setup, where everything is effectively modular, really simple to wire up. So as you look at it from the front, this would be on the right-hand side. There's a USB port, which is more for maintenance and service as far as updating. All of the firmware updates are actually managed through the inverter itself, but if needed, a firmware update can be pushed through the USB port as well. You can see the battery and communication knockouts on the right-hand side, which there is a protective cover that goes over this. We'll show a little bit later. You can see the battery terminals, the green circled in red. You also have the communication where you can see the blue Ethernet wire coming in. And then below that are the power and communication outputs going from the power module down to the battery modules below. And this is actually a picture of what the battery module looks like. So here you can see where those outputs from the prior image, the 2 powers on the right and the communication on the left, would then come into the linked in on the top left, battery in positive, battery in negative, and then the outs on the bottom as well. And again, similarly, USB ports available, but watertight with a cover. And effectively, what you would really be looking at is what the capacity and scale of that battery is. As you increase battery count, you do have an increased maximum output from the battery stack. So the minimum is 2.5 kilowatts peak output for a total of 5 kilowatt hour. And then as you stack, that does increase linear up to 5 and 6 units, which would cap at 12 kilowatt max output on an 11.4 kilowatt inverter. So even though it's slightly over the nameplate, it will give you that extra little bit of boost if you're in off-grid mode. But again, this just shows the configurations and stacking layouts available. And on this one, I do apologize, the photo is a little bit unclear. I have some additional photos that should make it more clear. But this is effectively showing what a stack of 6 batteries in a power module would look like. On the left-hand image, you can see your ground, battery in, and inverter communication coming into the power module at the, the power module at the top. Power module sending the power and communication out to the battery modules down. This is an example of an expansion cabinet. So you would then use the expansion kit to send the power and signal cables out from the first stack into the second stack. I will note the power cables can actually flow top to bottom or bottom to top. However, the communication cable coming from the first stack to the second stack would need to go to the link in on the top of the second stack. The communication cable is pre-packaged and already built for the allocation of the spacing of the 2 stacks, and it has enough room to make it all the way to the top of that second battery stack. But you can see that expansion accessory kit on the right, the 4 cables that come with it. And again, you would have an additional base that would allow you to put a second stack there. So once you have the battery stack itself wired up, again, you would then need to bring the communication from the inverter itself, which lands within the DC terminal, just above the DC terminal blocks on the main board of the inverter. That's going to come out and go into the communication input, which you can see here is represented with the blue Ethernet cable. You're then going to be taking your power cables from the DC blocks battery, as you can see highlighted in blue in the bottom left here, and bringing that into the battery input terminal. I will make a note, although I don't have it highlighted in this slideshow, depending on your application, if required, there is a secondary battery input on the left-hand side of the power module to come from the inverter. That said, the other components such as power to the additional battery modules and communication are all on the right. So we do typically recommend keeping everything wired on the same side of the battery stack. But again, in the case of a one-off opportunity where you need to be flexible, you do have that option for easier installation on the left. One thing I do want to call out on this slide, so this is that right-hand cover, again, showing the power module at the very top left-hand of this image here. Once you get all the wiring in, there is a cover. We did get feedback from installers, including Frankensolar, that the knockouts are slightly insufficient for the typical LB conduit, just because it's really squared. I think a big part of it is because it's squared off, and sometimes you're not always coming directly in at a 90-degree angle. That said, that has been forwarded to our R&D department and products department, so they are working on a slight revision to this. But you could certainly use a Dremel or something like that if needed to add a little space to meet code requirement. And then once all that's wired up, basically you will power on the battery stack to get ready for commissioning. Effectively, you're going to be switching the DC switch, which that top right image is an image of that left-hand side showing that additional battery input from the inverter, and the DC switch, which you would turn to the on position. Once it's in the on position, you can press and hold on the right-hand side the silver start button. That will start up the battery. You'll see a light come on the power module, and then you'll start seeing LEDs on the right-hand side of the battery modules themselves. And then once the battery is up and powered, you can then go ahead for at least 90 seconds. You can then go ahead and start looking at your inverter and make sure that you're ready for commissioning. We do have another call out here. We typically don't recommend installing a DC circuit breaker between the battery and the power control system. If you had to, it does need to be a high capacity 1000 volt, 63 amp minimum. And anytime that switch is switched, the system needs to already be turned off before that switch, because it's a high voltage system, it could risk causing damage to the equipment. With that, I'm going to jump over into our ShineTools app and settings. So the ShineTools app, historically, it's been around for a while, but we've actually made some massive investments in it over the last year, really working very closely with some of our key installers to optimize the experience, make it an easier user interface, make it more intuitive. It is available on both the iOS and Android store. For a while, the iOS was getting all the updates, but now that we've pretty much completed most of the updates, it is available in parallel on both platforms. So with that, you will just want to do a quick pre-commissioning check, make sure all your DC switches are on, you have good AC breakers running, you have some sun on the panels. If you're doing a PV system, you will need at least 80 volts to complete a commissioning, because once the system is under load, that will drop a little, and you need at least 50 volts to maintain operation of an inverter. And if, again, a rapid shutdown trigger or e-stop switch is installed, make sure that the switch is in the on position and the green band is showing. With that, you would open up your app and switch to O&M user. As mentioned, because this is an installer-focused app, you would need a login, but again, if you don't have one already and you're a Frankensolar customer, Frankensolar can help you to get a login set up, and we can help you maintain it thereafter as well. Once you're logged in, I personally like to make sure that everything's up to date, which actually the nice thing is on the most recent versions, the app will now actually pop up and tell you if a new version has been released to the App Store. But if you want to make sure just for certain or for your records, you can just click on the hamburger menu about ShineTools, and then this will tell you the current version you're running on and if there's an update available. Once you know that you're working with the most current version of ShineTools, you can then go into direct Wi-Fi, select your product. So as of right now, again, this is really focused on a min TLXHUS, but these upcoming products such as the SPH and our commercial WIT are going to be using the same remote app functionality because again, we've gotten really positive feedback from it. And we just want to make sure that everyone's experience is positive, whether it's residential or commercial. But with that, once you hit min, it's basically going to ask you to connect to the machine, which will give you the option to scan the barcode on the side of the inverter. Once you scan it, it'll populate the serial number of the device and ask you if you want to look for that device on your network. Once you do, depending on your phone, at least on my iPhone, it says, we would like to join this Wi-Fi network. Is it okay? You approve Apple to connect to your Wi-Fi network. And then once you do, you'd get the confirmation successful on the right-hand side. We do want to note you can only have ShineTools connected to one inverter at a time. I know that question has come up in the past. Additionally, you do want to make sure that your system is only connected to the inverter's Wi-Fi. I typically have a tip to people where I say one thing you might want to do is either once you actually physically connect to the inverter, you could either turn it on airplane mode or kill cellular, or even you can just go to your iOS cellular Wi-Fi assist and disable the background data updates. Because that's one feature that Apple came out with years ago, where basically if the Wi-Fi does not see a live World Wide Web internet connection, it will try to supplement that data with cellular, and it does so without asking you. And if it does that, it effectively is circumventing the direct connection to the inverter. That said, I only call this out because of the only negative issues we've really had. It's typically stuff like this where the phone's just interfering with the app itself. But great news, future generation, even the existing hardware will be compatible with a Bluetooth functionality. So we're really excited about that. And that should be out probably by Q1. But again, we're working on that. From there, very first thing you're going to want to do when you get in the inverter that I personally recommend is make sure you're on the current firmware. Once on the left-hand side, you can see the main landing page. Once you're in the direct Wi-Fi connection, you'll click on device information, version upgrade. The page will actually give you a list of what the current version of firmware on your inverter, your SYN, your APX, and your communications modules are. It'll tell you what you're currently on, what the target current version is available. If it's available, you'll have the option to hit the upgrade button. And in upgrading, you'll then get a screen like this where it'll pop up telling you that it's giving an upgrade. If there's multiple upgrades, it'll give you the parentheses showing that. Here's an example of what the LED lights look like when the firmware is writing to the machine. You'll notice the difference because you'll go from having just a couple of status lights to a relay of lights across those 4 LED indicators. And then once everything is complete, you'll get a pop-up saying the update was successful. You can confirm that and then continue to your next steps. So once you know your system is on the most current firmware, really for commissioning, you're going to go to quick settings. Again, we really tried to simplify and streamline this process. So we put all the most common commissioning and maintenance items in one screen. So you can see quick setting on the left, which then brings up the screen in the middle. From there, again, you're going to have your network communication, your remote activation standby. So this is similar to pre-PTO, except inverter off on. You can use this whether there's a battery or not. You can just simply remote, put it on standby, and then from your office, you can then enable the site remotely. Power sensor would be your smart meter. Battery type is obviously battery. Grid code, we have a whole host in there for different regions throughout North America. If you come across a jurisdiction and you need to customize a profile, if it's a one-off, we can certainly help you set those settings. If it's a utility that we expect a lot of business in, we could work with our R&D team to actually upload a new profile for you. There's EMS mode, again, just how you want to use your battery, AC coupling functionality, installation information, which we call our one-click summary, and a grid code parameter, which is a utility compliance report. That said, very first thing I personally do is typically get the communication set up. As I mentioned in the beginning of the call, there is a Wi-Fi and 4G versus Wi-Fi and LAN variant. So again, unfortunately, we don't have one that has all three simultaneously, but we think one of the values is the fact that our products come with these accessories from the factory versus being a $300 kit is, we think a great value add for us. That said, again, if you want to do Wi-Fi communication, you would simply just click on network type, Wi-Fi, put in the customer's Wi-Fi info and password. One thing I do call out on the second slide here is we do focus on 2.4 gigahertz networks. People tend to ask, why not 5G? I've actually came from service. 5G, generally the biggest issue is it doesn't have quite the same stability or range as a 2.4 does. Additionally, the data that the inverter is sending is effectively on par with sending, picture MMS text messages. They're not, it's very small data packs. There's no high bandwidth needed. You're really not going to see any benefit to a higher bandwidth. And we just found that it tends to have more complications with dropping and stability long term. And again, we ourselves haven't really been able to replicate why outside of it's just not as stable. Passwords, though, should be 6 to 20 characters. You can use some basic symbols, but we avoid, just because of password coding, we don't typically recommend anything too crazy that you wouldn't sort of see in a typical, Amazon not Amazon password, but any Wi-Fi device. Commas, exclamation points, question marks, asterisks, $sign should all be fine, but we sort of limit it to that. The alternative, again, is 4G activation. Real simple. Basically, you click 4G, click connect to network. One thing I would note here, again, is if you are going to use a 4G communication, the data logger or hardware ID from the box of the inverter needs to be associated with the plant in the monitoring server before activation. It's just a nuance of the cellular carrier's activation process. That said, we do have some improvements down the way. We're working on a plant-free activation, which is estimated by end of year. Again, we just still need to get that finalized. But for the time being, again, you can just go ahead and I'll show you in a later slide how you can access your fleet. And before you even go in the field, if you know you're going to use 4G or might use 4G, you can just add that to your plant ID. From there, smart sensor, again, power meter, really simple. It's either on or off. It's not an electric meter. If you do install the electric meter, you just confirm it, and then you'll see it displayed in your summary. Battery type here, again, we do have 3 different types of high voltage batteries that are approved for compliance. With Frankensolar, we are working on the APX high voltage battery, as you can see on the right there. So again, simply click it, click the battery, and click save. Grid code. This will be by default IEEE 1547240 for all the North American units. Again, that said, I don't necessarily know if we have any specific ones for Canada. I know there's some for Puerto Rico, California, Hawaii, so on. That said, again, if you guys are finding you're doing a lot of these and you're having to set manual settings, let us know. We can work with you to customize grid code. One question that comes up a lot is EMS modes. What does it mean? How does it function? So with these, really, load first or self-consumption mode is the default mode that most people will use. It's going to prioritize powering your loads, then back charging your battery, and then if the loads are covered and the battery is charged, then it will go to grid. Gives you the ability to do emergency backup as well if the conditions permitted. Then you also have time of use for either charging or discharging, whether you want to prioritize battery or grid. Really, this is just going to depend on what your time of use schedule looks like, if you're trying to pull from grid or send to grid, buy, sell, so on. Solar only backup, basically the system will just stay on standby. only for having backup in the event of a grid loss. And then finally, it's idle and clip from charged solar. Basically, the goal on this is really to just take surplus solar if you're really trying to stack the PV on that inverter. It just allows you to take that surplus and sort of always have available bandwidth. And then again, it can then self-discharge as needed when power from the grid is not available. That said, just a couple visualizations of what some of those modes look like. And we do have a zero export setting as well. It's not so much an EMS mode as much as a setting. And this, again, would just limit backfeeding power to the grid if your grid does not allow it. That said, once you kind of get through all those settings, again, you know, there's a couple things like AC couple or the voltage level. Those are going to be pretty much defaulted. You can certainly tweak those, but if you get through all those settings and you're ready to move forward, we have that installation information tab, which brings up the summary on the right-hand side. Again, we had customers that are working as installers, and they're finding, hey, we have to take 15, 20 photos every time we're on the job site to get all the confirmations of all the screens. We took that feedback and created a one-stop shop where you can see any warning error codes, if the inverter's producing, if it's connected to the server, if there's a power sensor, if there's a battery, if there's an ESS type, if there's a grid code. Well, there will be a grid code. Firmware versions, and it will all be available, as you can see here on the right. If you're looking at it and everything looks good, you can then go ahead and hit finish and screenshot. First time, you're going to have to give access to the app to save data on your device. But effectively, you just get this nice one-piece printout on the right-hand side, which you can save to your project folders and keep note. Again, if you're managing projects from the office and you have guys in the field, just gives you the peace of mind that they did all their due diligence, and it gives you all your bullet points in one place without having to dig through photos. And then finally, on that prior summary, obviously we did call out, you know, make sure there's no faults or errors within the project. If you are getting through and everything seems okay, but there are faults or errors, once you save that image, it does bring you back to the main screen. And from there, you could then click on the faults and warnings bar here, and it will actually pop up a window that will give you the fault or warning, title of what it is, and then typically some tips. This is something we're continuing to expand and grow. But again, we're just hoping it makes the installer's experience in the field a little more streamlined and a little more straightforward. And then finally, just to really highlight, you know, once the system is in and once the system is running, you then have your ShinePhone app interface. Again, really remote site monitoring app for the customers. They can see their daily and aggregate production. If they have more than one site, they can see that in one app. Even you as an installer could even look at your fleet through this. You can also see power flow of the system, again, your PV, your inverter, your loads, your battery, your grid, and so on. And then finally, the web-based monitoring. So this, again, is mostly focused on how the system is performing, how it's behaving, if there's any faults, error codes, and so on. But for a lot of our installers, if you're not an end customer, you'll typically navigate to this from the OSS Installer Portal. This is really the installer headquarters, if you were, of the online monitoring, in the sense of you can create and manage plants or job sites, as you would call them. Device list, you can check what devices are associated with what plant, what their activity status is. You can manage end customer users if you want to give them monitoring access. You can manage employees. So again, if you want to give an installer in the field a unique credential to log in, you can do so. You can also do RMA submissions through the service hall. Allows you, if you're in the field and you're identifying, you know what, I think there's a problem here, I need to submit this for a warranty claim, you can submit it right in the portal here. And our hope is to have this integrated with the in the field phone app as well long term, but that's more of a Q1, Q2 upgrade. And then finally, just high level fleet overview, again, daily and aggregate generation, machine status, if it's online, offline, if there's a fault. And then we're actually adding an additional status for the device list, which is a retired status. basically letting you know that a machine is offline, but offline purposefully and previously associated with a project. Just again, for better internal tracking and then identifying if you have a site with repeat problems and so on.
However, for the for that as an option here, we have the mini inverter certified to UL 1741 CRD, which allows you to connect any inverter size to the main panel, and so you won't need any upgrade with that. You just need the smart meter and the inverter.
The transfer switch can be manually overwritten, so it is definitely possible to install without the battery.
And actually, yeah, that makes a great sense. So that's actually one of the things I had covered during the PowerPoint is the manual bypass mode. So yeah, I guess in theory you could put it in and put it in bypass.
So great competitive advantage for sure. Wrap it up here, guys. I really appreciate really thorough presentation, and from our side again, I want to highlight like how popular this product has been and how great the uptake has been of Growatt in the Canadian market. So we're super excited about it from our side, and the support has been really good as well, and really excited to have the three of you guys there as well. I think you guys are very professional and great presentation.
Yeah, of course. And we're happy to have you as an exclusive Canadian partner. Look forward to a long future. And let's certainly do this again when some of those upgrades come out, whether it's parallel or the new SYN. Yeah, that'd be great. And hopefully this is useful for all your installers. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, for anyone that isn't set up with us yet and has some additional questions or would like to talk to an account executive at Frankensolar, just send an email to sales@frankensolar.ca, and we'll hook you up with an account rep to get in contact with you. Awesome. Thank you. Great. Thanks so much, guys.